Welcome back to DBC. Today we continue with the Book of Joy, and we will complete the remaining 5 pillars of joy, the first of which is acceptance. This was a tough one, sort of philosophically for me. Abrams here mentions, he says that, quote, the ability to accept our life in all its pain, imperfection, and beauty. Acceptance, it must be pointed out, is the opposite of resignation and defeat. The Archbishop, for example, did not accept the inevitability of apartheid, but he did accept its reality. Not really sure here. So what would that have looked like for the Archbishop to have said, oh no, there is not apartheid? Like no one would agree with that. So maybe it's a acceptance of now and now what? Maybe is the question. Not really sure about that one. Forgiveness. So Bishop Tutu says, for example, those who say that forgiving is a sign of weakness haven't tried it. A natural response when someone hits you is wanting to hit back, he mentions. He says, so why do we admire people then who don't choose revenge? It is our recognition of the fact that, yes, there are those who think that an eye for an eye is going to satisfy you, but in the end you discover that an eye for an eye will leave the whole world blind. Two points on this sentence. I like his point about satisfaction. Those who think that an eye for an eye is going to satisfy you. And I guess the idea here is that it won't. And then there's a second point, which is that it leaves the whole world blind. So those are kind of two different reasons to or not to choose revenge. In the sense of that it's ultimately unsatisfactory or unsatisfying. And think about all the movies that we've seen since forever of revenge. I think of Batman when the original one or the older one with Jack Nicholson as the Joker who kills Batman's parents. And I don't know that they maybe touched on, because I think that his romantic interest in the movie is a psychologist. And usually the movie ends when justice has been done or revenge has been accomplished, and there isn't much of it's like, okay, good, hey, justice is done, there's a sense of fairness and all is right with the world, and scene and roll the credits. However, there isn't an insight into what's going on then, the next week or 6 months later or a year later. Is there still a sense of loss or of lacking there? And in the sense of seeking revenge or satisfaction seems ultimately unfulfilling. The second half of that sentence is that an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. It's not actually true. Will it leave everyone blind? No. It will leave victims blind who are already blind, and it will leave eye gougers blind as well. Those who gouge someone else's eye are then taken revenge upon. So not everybody, but just victims and those who would perpetrate. Different pieces, but I do appreciate the piece of satisfaction. So a funny note here is that, we're talking about forgiveness and cooperation. There's a study about apes, sheep, goats, hyena, dolphins, that they all make up after disagreements. And of all the species that have been studied, there's only one that failed to show behavior that reconciles relationships after conflict. And those were domestic cats, which I thought was hilarious and appropriate. Furthermore, there's a finding that unforgiving, holding on to resentment, compromises the immune system. And there's a story of the monk who carries the pretty woman across the river. There's 2 monks, going for a walk, and they come across a river. There's a pretty young woman there with a very expensive kimono. This is in Japan, or not kimono, but a dress. And these monks had taken vows of chastity, so they weren't allowed to touch women. So this monk carries the woman across the river, and they continue on. The other monk is sort of upset by this, and he continues to hike upset until he can't stand it. And hours later, he's like, I can't believe you broke your vow and you carried that woman across the river. And the first monk, of course, has his great reply, which is yes, but unlike you, I left her at the river. Gratitude is next. Here we return to acceptance again. And he says that acceptance means not fighting reality. Gratitude means embracing reality. And in the last video I mentioned, there's kind of been a lack of gratitude mentioned this whole year. There's a story from 60 Minutes of a man named Anthony Hinton, or Anthony Ray Hinton, who spent 30 years on death row for a crime he did not commit. He spent these 30 years in a 5 by 7 foot cell in solitary confinement, allowed out only 1 hour per day. He ended up counseling several inmates, 54 of which were put to death, and guards as well, and the guards like begging his lawyers to get him out of there. Upon his release, he was asked by the 60 Minutes reporter if he was angry at those who put him in jail for these 30 years, solitary confinement. He responded that he had forgiven all the people who had sent him to jail. The interviewer, blown away, asked him how, to which he replied, "If I'm angry and unforgiving," he says, "then they will have taken the rest of my life, not just those 30 years. Number 7 is compassion, which is in Pali karuna, which is one of the 4 Brahma viharas that we've been mentioning, along with equanimity, loving kindness, and sympathetic joy. So compassion, karuna. The Dalai Lama repeats this message over and over. He says, too much self-centered thinking is a source of suffering. A compassionate concern for others' well-being is the source of happiness. He says, if you want to be happy, if you want a happy life, that is, and fewer problems, you have to develop a serious concern for the well-being of others, a serious concern. And a distinction is made toward the end of this chapter between compassion and empathy. While empathy is simply experiencing another person's emotions, compassion is a more empowered state where we want what is best for the other person as well. So the Dalai Lama gives an image. He says, if we see a person who is being crushed by a rock, the goal is not to get under the rock and feel what they are feeling. It is to help to remove the rock. Generosity, the final pillar of joy. He says, focus here on the quality of our relationships. A study is mentioned that shows that money actually can buy happiness. We say, like, it doesn't, money can't buy happiness. It actually can. Money can buy happiness if the money is spent on somebody else, like buying things for other people, let's say. Additionally, generosity can be with other things that we spend our time with, instead of time. We speak of spending time or paying attention. Quick thing to step back just a second to the money can't buy happiness, so that it can buy happiness for us if we give it to others. But do the others then, is it at their expense in the sense of like, if it's a material thing, let's say, is that ultimately going to be unfulfilling and unsatisfying for them? Interesting question. Furthermore, they both mention a great generosity of spirit, placing yourself as becoming an oasis of peace or a pool of serenity that ripples out to all those around us. And this idea that we are all contagious and we can have a generous spirit. Those are the 8 pillars of joy. We're almost done, just a little bit left. We'll see you next time.